In March 2021, Ethan Parker sold his house in Austin for $420,000 and bought a dream instead. He said he was done building homes for other people. Now, he wanted to build freedom for himself. Within days, every dollar from that sale was wired into crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and a handful of coins with names that sounded like jokes but promised revolutions. He called it the smartest move of his life. His friends called it a gamble. Ethan wasn't stupid. He was a civil engineer, a man who understood structure, risk, and weight. But in a world where screenshots replaced paychecks and millionaires were made overnight, even logic began to look outdated. He told himself this wasn't greed. It was vision. The old world builds walls, he'd say. The new one builds chains, blockchains. When prices doubled in a few months, he felt unstoppable. Every notification on his phone was proof that he was right, that he'd escaped the system. He posted charts, quoted billionaires, and started calling his rented apartment temporary housing. But freedom built on euphoria is fragile. And what goes up, when fueled by fear of missing out, rarely lands gently. Ethan didn't know it yet, but the day he sold his house was the day he sold his safety net. What he bought wasn't freedom. It was volatility, disguised as hope. Ethan Parker grew up in the kind of neighborhood where every house looked the same one-story homes, trimmed lawns, and pickup trucks parked in driveways. His father worked in construction for 30 years, a man who believed in the dignity of hard work and the safety of owning what you built. He used to say, "If you can touch it, you can trust it." Ethan carried that phrase like a blueprint through most of his life. He wasn't the type to chase trends. He went to college, earned a degree in civil engineering, and spent his 20s designing bridges, foundations, and housing projects across Texas. His world was made of measurements and margins, of calculations that always added up. Money came slowly, predictably like concrete, curing under the sundae. By his mid-30s, he had everything his parents ever wanted for him: a stable career, a paid-off home in Austin, and a small but growing savings account. But what no one told him was that stability can start to feel like stillness. He watched younger co-workers talk about early retirement, financial freedom, and crypto portfolios. They laughed over coffee about passive income streams and 100x tokens. Ethan would smile politely, pretending not to care, but the seed was planted. When the pandemic hit in 2020, construction slowed. He worked from home, isolated, with too much time and too many screens. The internet became his new workplace. YouTube videos about Bitcoin, podcasts about decentralization, endless Reddit threads where strangers claimed to have cracked the code. He wasn't looking for get-rich schemes. He was looking for meaning, something beyond blueprints and deadlines. Each story he read seemed to mock his caution. A teacher turned millionaire, a gamer who retired at 25, people his age and younger who had made more in a week than he did in a year. He told himself they were lucky, not wise. But deep down, envy disguised itself as curiosity. Ethan began studying the mechanics of crypto, convincing himself that this wasn't gambling, it was innovation. He read white papers late into the night, joined Telegram groups full of optimism and noise, and followed influencers who said the system was broken and that digital money was the new frontier. To him, it felt like the Industrial Revolution reborn, except this time, he didn't want to be the one left pouring concrete, while others built empires online. His wife noticed the change first. He started checking prices before breakfast, talking about financial revolutions over dinner. He'd say, "This isn't about greed, it's about being early." She didn't understand why the man who once prized security was now chasing volatility. Ethan told her he wasn't chasing, he was evolving. When Bitcoin crossed $50,000, he couldn't ignore the voice in his head whispering that he was late. He looked at his house, the symbol of his success, and saw a frozen asset. Every brick looked like a missed opportunity. So he made a choice that felt bold, visionary, almost heroic. He sold it all. His parents were horrified. His friends called him reckless, but Ethan smiled with the confidence of a man who had finally decided to bet on himself. "This is the new real estate," he said, "except this time it doesn't take decades." What he didn't realize was that the foundation he was standing on wasn't made of stone or steel anymore. It was built on sentiment, and sentiment, unlike concrete, can collapse overnight. At first, it was just numbers on a screen, green candles, upward charts, a growing balance that didn't feel real. Ethan watched his crypto wallet double in value in less than 3 months. 400,000 became 8, then 9, then more. He told himself it wasn't luck. It was logic. He'd studied, calculated, believed. The market was simply rewarding his conviction. His mornings began with market charts instead of coffee. He joined live streams where influencers shouted "HODL" and promised generational wealth to those who didn't blink. Ethan listened like a disciple, nodding at words like disruption, blockchain revolution, and financial sovereignty. The vocabulary of faith replaced the language of engineering. By summer 2021, he was a different man. The quiet, methodical builder had turned into a full-time trader, confident, restless, hungry. He started tweeting about strong hands and weak minds. He wrote threads about how the future belonged to those who dared to bet big. People replied, asking for advice. Some called him visionary. He liked that word. Friends who once warned him began to ask for his opinion. They called him the crypto guy. And for the first time in his life, Ethan felt ahead of the curve. The respect he used to earn through years of steady work now came with a single screenshot. He posted his gains, online numbers rising, charts glowing, captions about freedom and courage. Each like was a small dose of validation. Each comment fed the quiet ego he never knew he had. His wife noticed the change. He spoke faster, slept less, checked prices during dinner. When she asked if they should cash out, he laughed. Cash out? This is just the beginning. He promised her they'd buy 2 houses next year, one to live in, one to rent. He started browsing listings again. Except now, the money didn't come from his salary. It came from belief. He stopped calling it investing. He called it building wealth. But what he was really building was confidence, fragile, inflated, untouchable. When new coins launched, he joined in. Some doubled in days, others vanished overnight. He shrugged off losses as normal volatility. Every dip, he told himself, was just a setup for the next run. He'd say it with the certainty of a man who mistook momentum for mastery. By late 2021, his portfolio hit 7 figures on paper. He took screenshots, sent them to his parents, told them not to worry about retirement. He even began mentoring younger traders, preaching patience and conviction, unaware that his own conviction had quietly turned into denial. To everyone around him, Ethan looked like a success story, the man who sold his house and found freedom online. But to those who knew him best, something felt off. He no longer talked about bridges or blueprints. He talked about charts and cycles, like a preacher chasing his next revelation. He wasn't just chasing wealth anymore. He was chasing the feeling of being right, and that more than any crash or correction would become his undoing. It didn't happen overnight. It just felt that way. In November 2021, Bitcoin touched $69,000. Ethan celebrated with champagne and screenshots. By January, it was under 40. By summer, it would crash below 20. He used to check prices every hour. Now, he checked them every minute. At first, he called it a correction. He told his wife it was healthy volatility. But the charts kept bleeding, and the color green became a memory. His $1 million portfolio, the one he'd shown to everyone, was melting one red candle at a time. He tried to stay calm. He read motivational posts. He doubled down. When Bitcoin fell to 30, he borrowed against his holdings, convinced that real believers buy the dip. The market didn't care. Within weeks, margin calls began. His exchange sold his coins automatically. By the time he realized what was happening, half his portfolio was gone. He barely slept. He stopped answering calls. His wife pleaded with him to walk away, to take what was left and rebuild. But he couldn't. It wasn't about money anymore, it was about pride. He couldn't stand the idea of being wrong. When the Terra collapse hit in mid-2022, Ethan was holding several altcoins tied to it. In 48 hours, they went from thousands to fractions of a cent. He sat in silence, watching the numbers vanish on screen like pixels fading to black. There was no explosion, no dramatic ending. Just stillness, just loss. He sold the last of his holdings during a panic drop. After fees and taxes, he had less than $20,000 left. Not enough to buy back the house, not enough to undo the choices that led him there. His wife moved out 2 months later. Not out of anger, but exhaustion. She said, "You stopped being here long before the money disappeared." And she was right. Ethan hadn't been present in months, lost in a digital world that promised freedom and delivered nothing but silence. He rented a small apartment on the outskirts of Austin. No furniture, just a mattress, a desk, and an old laptop. The irony wasn't lost on him. The man who once sold his house for digital real estate now had neither. Every morning, he opened the charts out of habit, not hope. The lines no longer excited him. They just reminded him of what belief without discipline costs. He scrolled through old screenshots of his 7-figure balance and felt nothing. Not pride, not regret, just emptiness. His parents didn't say, "I told you so." They simply invited him home for dinner. His father asked if he'd work construction again. Ethan nodded quietly. It wasn't shame he felt, it was gravity. The weight of reality, pressing down after years of floating. One night, he stared at his reflection in the dark window and whispered, "It wasn't the market that broke me. It was me." For the first time, he didn't mean it as self-blame. He meant it as understanding. Because the crash didn't just erase his wealth. It revealed what it was built on. In America, risk is a virtue. It's woven into every story, every startup, every self-made legend. From the gold rush to Silicon Valley, the heroes are always the ones who bet everything and somehow won. The culture doesn't admire survival. It worships ascent. Ethan had grown up inside that narrative. He'd been taught that comfort kills ambition, that success favors those who move first and fast. He'd seen it at work, in friends who left stable jobs to chase startups, in podcasts that glorified all-in mindsets. He thought fear was the enemy. He never realized that fear, the kind that keeps you cautious, patient, deliberate, was part of what kept him safe. After the crash, his world slowed down whether he wanted it to or not. There were no more alerts, no more adrenaline spikes from seeing green charts. Silence replaced momentum. And in that silence, he began to think about what freedom really meant. He read more, not about coins or markets, but about cultures. He came across an essay comparing American ambition with Asian patience. In the West, wealth was a race, a sprint, measured by acceleration. In the East, it was a rhythm measured by time, balance, and continuity. One taught you how to conquer the mountain. The other taught you how to stay on it. He started remembering his father's hands rough, cracked, slow. The man never rushed anything. He worked on one project at a time, often underpaid, always steady. He never spoke about financial freedom, but he never seemed trapped either. Every nail he hammered stayed. Every paycheck was small but certain. And every night, he slept well. Ethan wondered when he stopped valuing that kind of peace. Maybe it happened when he began scrolling too much, when strangers online started defining success for him in screenshots, in speed, in noise. He realized the irony. The faster he tried to chase freedom, the more enslaved he'd become to the need for constant movement. One afternoon, he visited his parents. His father was repairing an old fence the same way he always did. Slow, methodical, precise. Ethan watched quietly before offering to help. For the first time in years, he spent an afternoon working with his hands again. No notifications, no price updates, just the sound of wood meeting steel. It felt like coming home. Later that evening, he told his father what had happened, the loss, the panic, the regret. His father listened without judgment, then said something simple. "Son, you can build fast, or you can build forever. You can't do both." Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was already sinking in. He started to see things differently. In America, people treat risk like proof of courage. But in many parts of the world, patience is the greater test. Because waiting, truly waiting, requires strength, discipline, and faith that the reward doesn't have to come fast to matter. Ethan stopped trying to rebuild his portfolio. Instead, he rebuilt his routine. He budgeted. He cooked his own meals. He saved small amounts every month, not to get rich, but to regain balance. And slowly he began to see that freedom isn't found in speed, it's found in stability. The crash had taught him what no bull market ever could, that wealth without wisdom is noise, and time, not money, is the real measure of success. Ethan never went back to the markets. Not out of bitterness, but clarity. He realized that what he'd been chasing wasn't wealth, it was validation. The numbers had made him feel seen, powerful, certain. But certainty is a fragile thing when it depends on applause. In the months after the crash, he lived quietly. He took a modest job designing small-scale renovations, rebuilding homes for others. Each project was tangible, grounded, something he could stand inside and touch. It felt honest. He no longer dreamed of exponential growth. He just wanted solidity, the kind that doesn't fluctuate overnight. He sold what little crypto he had left and used the money to buy tools, not tokens. He built shelves, fixed old fences, and helped neighbors patch their roofs after storms. The work didn't make him rich, but it made him real again. On weekends, he'd sit on his porch, not his old house, but a small rented one outside Austin, and watch the light fade across the fields. The silence that once felt like loss now sounded like peace. For the first time in years, his heartbeat wasn't tied to a chart. It was tied to the present. Occasionally, he'd receive messages from old friends still chasing the next big one. They'd ask if he regretted selling. He'd smile and reply, "No. I just wish I'd learned sooner what's actually worth keeping." He still followed markets from a distance, but more as a student of behavior than a participant. He'd learned that money is never really about math. It's about emotion, ego, and endurance. The hardest part of finance isn't risk. It's restraint. One evening, his father came by with coffee. They sat in silence for a while before the old man said, "You seem lighter." Ethan nodded. "I used to think freedom was about having everything I wanted," he said. "Now I think it's about needing less than I thought I did." There was no triumph in his tone, no bitterness, just calm. The kind that comes after losing what you thought you couldn't live without and realizing you still can. He didn't buy freedom. He built it, one quiet choice at a time.